This is Rav Sha'ul, Paul Sides. My pen name is Rav Sha'ul. It means Paul the Teacher. I don't use it as a title. It's just my pen name. It's descriptive. Anyway, I've been asked a lot to give my testimony. I've written probably one of the most complete websites on the internet from a Nazarene perspective, and I've written 7 or at least 7 books. I've got 3 that I'm working on now, and I get a lot. I teach on Facebook and via email, and I'm starting to do some videos on my YouTube channel. So before I really launched that effort, I wanted to give my testimonial. I get asked a lot, Sha'ul, how do you know all this stuff? And it's a long story, and I have never told it before. I'm 50 years old, and I've been waiting to this point in my life to give my testimony. I wanted to wait until I was qualified as an elder in the assembly to really take this next step. But anyway, let me give you my testimony. It really starts back when I was a very young child. I was raised Church of Christ, and even back then, I'm very competitive, and everything that I do, I want to be the best at it. I'm an overachiever. And anyway, back in those days when I was like, my early teens, 10, 11, 12, I would join my church's Bible Bowl team. I don't know if you know what that is, but a Bible Bowl is, where churches put together a team and they're given a book of the New Testament to study, and then they compete against other churches. So I joined my Bible Bowl team, and even as a teenager, I learned, memorized actually most of the New Testament. So that's kind of where it started. Then I got out of school, and I knew I didn't want to be Church of Christ, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I was raised very poor. My mom raised 3 boys by herself on minimum wage there in West Texas. So I couldn't afford to go to college. So I decided to join the Army. I thought, well, I'll go that route. I kept seeing it on TV, be all you can be, and all this other stuff. Army of one. So I thought, well, I'll just go do that and get my education that way. And, so I went into the military, and, again, I thought if I was going to waste 4 years of my life, I might as well make the most of it. And, so I decided to go into a combat MOS, instead of being a cook or something or a medic. I went into artillery, and I decided, I wanted to even, do whatever I could to make the most of that. So I decided to go airborne artillery. So I did. I went airborne artillery, and I got stationed at Fort Bragg, and this is all part of the story. So I was stationed there at Fort Bragg, and I decided, instead of being, just like every other GI and going out and drinking and womanizing every night, I would go find myself a church home. So I started shopping around, and I found a church that I really liked. It was a non-denominational church, and and I started going there, and I pledged membership, and I became a leader there in a college and career group. And so I asked the elders there if I could. This church had a Christian seminary, and had a Christian dorm where these budding ministers would live, about my age. But you couldn't live off post if you were single, so I had to get permission from the base commander and the permission from the elders, to live there in that Christian dorm and study with them on my off time. So that's what I did. I lived there, and so I'd go, serve in the military all day long, and then when that was done, I would go back to this church where I lived in the seminary there in the dorm, and I'd study, and I'd debate with these other young men about my age. We were about 20, 21 years old. And so I learned even more that way. And one day, and this is where it all begins. There's about 3 churches, 3 or 4. I'm sorry, a bunch of churches actually in 3 or 4 states around North Carolina that supported a prophet. He was a missionary, and he was a renowned prophet. He had prophesied some things, and he was a tested and true prophet. they had come true, and he spoke for Yahuah. Back then we didn't call him Yahuah. This was it's 20 years ago, actually 30 years ago. It's before the move that Yahuah began. First restoring Yahweh and now Yahuah, but this is way before that. So we all called him Jesus and Lord because that's all we knew. So anyway, they brought this man back every year or every couple of years. All these churches, in this 3-state region would bring him back in, and he would give a big production of, and tell the assembly, the family, what was going on around the world. I mean, what he experienced and the move, that he saw, and he would give a report. And so anyway, he came into town to do that, and so I went to witness it. Of course, I was 21 years old, and I really wasn't interested in what he had to say, because in through the front door walked the head cheerleader of the local high school, beautiful young 18-year-old girl, and I was 21, and so I started flirting with her. Wasn't even paying attention. And there's probably about I don't know. It seemed like, looking back on it, as you see what's about to happen, how nervous I was at the time. But anyway, there was at least 1,000 people. In my mind, I'm thinking 5,000, but I really don't remember. It was a lot of people. The place was packed from churches from 3-state region had all come to hear this. So he was giving his presentation, and I was flirting with this girl, wasn't paying attention, and right in the middle of his presentation, he stopped and he announced to everyone that Yahuah had a word that he wanted to speak over somebody. Well, I wasn't paying attention, and so he stopped his presentation and he said, "You there in a blue and white striped shirt," and I didn't hear him because I wasn't paying attention, and so he said it again and again, and finally the people around me, started nudging me, saying, "Hey, he's talking to you." And so I looked up there, and sure enough, he was pointing right at me. So they urged me to go up there, and, I was scared to death. I didn't want to go up there. I didn't even know if I believed in all that prophecy stuff or prophets or anything like that. I was raised Church of Christ. To me, the Old Testament had been done away with. Yahuah didn't move like that anymore, But kind of find out, he doesn't change, and neither does his methods. So I went up there, and he got a chair up there and put me in it. So I was in the hot seat. And from then on, I don't really remember anything because I was extremely scared. I didn't know what he was going to say. I was embarrassed, being up there. And I was just trying to make time with this cheerleader. And now here I am up there on stage with some crazy prophet putting oil on my face and laying his hands on me. I never experienced anything like that before. And I really didn't know what to do. So I did nothing. I sat there. So he laid his hands on me. And he said what he had to say, and when he was done, I got up and went back to my seat. And afterwards, one of the elders in the church came up and told me, he said, "Paul, you need to go buy a tape of that meeting, and you need to transcribe what that prophet said to you." And I didn't even know what he said to me. So I was just like, "Okay, I guess, yeah, I'll do that." So I did. I went and got the tape, and I took it home, and this elder reminded me that, the scriptures declare that, receive a prophet in the name of a prophet, and you'll receive the prophet's reward. So he told me, you need to accept this man, in the name of Yahuah, and what he had to say. So I went home. Got to get a drink from my Bubba cup. So I went home and I listened to it. And I was quite amazed of what I heard. And I wrote it down and I laminated. And it stays with me everywhere I go for the past 30 years. It's my bookmark in my Bible. And I read it every now and then and I meditate on it, and I have for the past 30 years. I'll read it to you just so you know what was said. The prophet laid his hands on me and anointed me with oil. And he said, "The hand of Yahuah is on thee, my son." Of course, back then he said Lord, but I'm going to replace that with Yahuah. He said, "The hand of Yahuah is on thee, my son, even to shake thee, even to break thee, even to move on thee, even to make thee a holy vessel in my hand. And though at times you come across as confident, you come across with a sense of humor, I know at times the despondency of your own soul. I know the holes that are within your heart. I know the time that you feel like crying. I know the times when loneliness is stemmed from a childhood where you went through things. I know at times as a spiritual child that you wrestled with feeling like you were abandoned and alone. I would say to you, yea, the hand of Yahuwah is going to make you into a friend of God. And it is only my friendship that will satisfy you, says Yahuwah. And I'm going to stir up in you a spirit of intercession and teaching. And out of that intercession, as you pray for the men you've been burdened for, evangelism is going to flow. And I'm going to use you, says Yahuwah, even to evangelize everyone around you. I would say unto you, give yourself to me these days, my son, for I am working on you, says Yahuwah. Do not be afraid of relationships, says Yahuwah, because it's all part of the process of sanctification. Do not be afraid of pain, because without pain there is no gain. And know this, you are in the kiln of God, and I'm going to fire you, says Yahuwah, to bring a beautiful finish into your life, and then, at a later point, I'm going to move on you. I've seen the disconcerting circumstances that have been in your life, even the ups and downs that you face in your own military unit. And I've seen the things that concern you, says Yahuwah, but I would say to you that these are the dealings of Yahuwah. I would say unto you, do not be afraid of them, but know, says Yahuwah, that the Spirit of Yahuwah is working on you. The Spirit of Yahuwah is moving on you. And I'm surely forming you in these days, even as a holy weapon in my own hand, even for a service in a day yet to come, says Yahuwah. What do you say to that? I didn't know what to say to that. So I wrote it down and I laminated it later. 2 days later, I was released from my final formation of the day there in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was going back to the barrack or to the dorm there at the church, where I lived. And I was cresting a hill going about 40 miles an hour. And over the other side of the hill came a Camaro going about 40 miles an hour. Was the speed limit, so we were both going about 40. And he swerved into my lane. Well, the problem is I was on a motorcycle. So time stood still, and I hit my brakes, and I was going too fast. My brakes locked up, and I went into a slide. And I thought to myself, I had all kinds of time. I mean, it was like time had literally stood still. And I thought to myself, Paul, if you lay this bike down, you're going to slide up under that Camaro going 40, both of y'all going 40 miles an hour, like 80 miles an hour. And you're going to die. There's no way you'll survive that. And, so I told myself, you know what? The only chance I had really is to let up off the brakes and brace for impact, which is what I did. So I braced for impact, and I hit him head on. It threw me off my motorcycle, and I hit his windshield with my back. It shattered his windshield, and when I hit it like that, it threw me head over heels about 50 feet, and I landed on my behind, and my head hit the pavement, and it shattered my helmet. I had a helmet on. And I looked up, and the motorcycle I was riding was coming in the same path. I just went before it. But it was flipping right over that Camaro just like I was, and it landed right on top of me and bounced off to the side. Now this is, like I said, our military formation had just let out. There were soldiers everywhere. And this happened right in front of a medic station. So there were medics that saw it, and so they ran out there, and and I was laying there before the medics got there, and I was thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to make it through this. I'm surprised I'm even conscious. So I whispered a little prayer to my father. I said, Father, if you get me out of this, I said, you remember me, the one you had that prophet come lay hands on a couple of days ago. I said, it's me. I said, if you get me out of this, I will serve you with the rest of my life. And so I whispered that little prayer, and I started patting myself down. And I thought to myself, I'm okay. I'm not hurt at all. So I started to sit up. But by that time, the medics had got there, and they told me to lay back down. And I said, no, I'm fine. They said, no, you're not fine. You're in shock. And so I thought to myself, well, they're probably right. That makes sense to me. So I laid there. I didn't move. So the ambulance came, and the hospital prepared for this, terribly injured motorcycle victim. And they put me in the ambulance. And by the time I got to the hospital, I'd already talked the paramedics into believing I was fine, and I was fine. They looked me over. I didn't even have a scratch, not even a bruise. I mean, literally not a scratch. So when they got there, they opened up the back of the ambulance, and I crawled out, and the doctors and the team that had assembled to receive this critically injured patient, thought I was just somebody riding along with the patient. They didn't realize that I was the patient. I was the victim. And so they looked at the paramedics and I'm like, well, where's the victim? And the paramedics were, in awe. They said, he just walked right past you. So they checked me over and released me. I was fine. I actually made it back to the scene of the accident before they cleaned it up. My mangled motorcycle, totaled my motorcycle, was still on the ground. And there were people around there still talking about it. And I walked up there and I stood among the people that were just talking about what they'd just seen, and I asked them what happened, and they told me they just saw this guy get killed on a motorcycle. Well, I didn't get killed on that motorcycle. What I did do, though, is I made a promise. 2 weeks later, I came down on leave, on orders, not leave. I came down on orders to go to Korea. It was 1988. It was the Seoul Olympics. And I was being sent there as a peacekeeping force, because North and South Korea don't exactly like each other, and the Olympics being there was a big threat that there might be some kind of terrorism or something. So, and this was kind of before terrorism. So anyway, I got sent there, and it's a restricted tour, So I was sent. I actually got put on the DMZ. I didn't get to go to Seoul and guard the Olympics. I got to go because remember I'm combat. I had to go sit on the DMZ. The DMZ is a demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea. It's technically a war zone, the most volatile place on earth. So here I am, just having had this prophet lay hands on me and say these things to me that I didn't understand. Now I don't even have a church home. I've been banished to the DMZ on the other side of the world for a year. So what do? I didn't know what to do. So what I did do was every day after final formation there in Korea, I would climb. Korea's full of mountains, very mountainous region. And on top of one of these mountains was an old abandoned chapel. And you had to climb. I probably, if I can find the pictures of it, I'll scan them in and include it in his testimony. But anyway, I think I have some pictures somewhere of it. But it's just this huge mountain with stairs, a staircase, going up to this chapel. So every day I would take I had a jam box and I had a Bible, and I had some praise and worship music from Maranatha singers. And I would take my jam box and my Bible and I would go up to this abandoned chapel, and I literally would spend, the next 3 or 4 hours that evening every single night for a year up at that chapel praising and worshiping Yahuah and studying his word. Because that's all I knew to do. I'd already memorized most of the New Testament when I was a kid, but now, I was opening myself up to, the rest of the scriptures. I was reading Psalms and Proverbs and the prophets. I was trying to read everything. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I didn't know what this was. And I never set out to be in the ministry, and I still didn't. I didn't want to go into ministry. I didn't ask for this. That was my thinking, but I didn't have anything else to do there for a year, so I did do that. I climbed that mountain at that chapel, and I worshiped Yahuah, and I studied and studied and studied. So a year later, I get out, and a couple years later, I get out of the military, and I continue on with my life. I go get my degree in computer science and math, which is the whole reason I was even in the military to begin with, was to get the Army College Fund. So, I got it, and I went back, and I, went to school, University of North Texas, and got my degree there, and went out to conquer the world. I was going to be a captain of industry. I wasn't going to be a minister. That was never, or a teacher or anything. I was going to be me, and that's what I set out to do. And so I did finish college and went to work for IBM and all that stuff. And that didn't last long before I started my own business, and I've been self-employed ever since. Now, during that time though, I did start going when I got back, to Dallas out of the Army. It's about 1993 when I graduated, so it's about 1991 or something. I joined some churches. I joined one of the biggest churches here, the North Church. It's a big 5,000 member mega church. And I became a leader there. I was the youngest ever anointed there. into leadership, and I fell foul of the pastor and assistant pastor, because when I taught, they didn't like it. They didn't agree, because I was teaching the law. I had home groups and all that stuff, and the newsletter that I put out, and I was teaching this stuff. And so they, called me into their office and said, listen, Paul, you need to teach what we teach, and I said, well, you don't teach the truth. I said, what I'm teaching is true. I can prove it. And they said, well, it's not that we don't agree with what you're teaching. It's just for the sake of unity, this is a non-denominational, charismatic, more money, more people than money kind of church. And we want our numbers to stay up at the 5,000 person range. We don't want them to drop, because, every head that comes through that door is more money in my back pocket, their back pocket. So I told him, I said, well, you know what? You can keep your church and your doctrine, and I'm going to take my toys and I'm going to play somewhere else. So I left the church for good, when I was about 27 years old. And I started a website called The End Time Saint, where I was a Christian apologist. I was out there doing battle for Jesus. And I knew the Christian doctrine inside and out, and I was good at it. And, but over that period of time, I kept being confronted with men, sons of Yahuah, who would challenge me on the Sabbath, and the feasts and the law. And, and of course I was a Christian, I thought, Jesus was the end of the law, and, Sundays, anyway. So I would try to defend it, and I was getting my behind handed to me over and over again. I couldn't defeat it. And it bothered me. So at the time, I was pretty successful. I had a big 5,000 square foot home. I was single here in Dallas, and I had a business. Well, I walked away from all that. My house was repossessed, and I moved to a small cabin on the lake in Grand Lake, Oklahoma, by myself, just me and my laptop. I decided to separate myself from all Christian influence, from all my friends, family, everything. And just go isolate myself, because there was something I didn't know. There was something that I didn't understand. I kept getting defeated when it came to the Sabbath and the feast and law, and I was just so sure that those things had been done away with, but yet I couldn't prove it, and I kept losing these wars, So I moved out there, and I lived in this little bitty cabin for 3 years. It took me that long to figure it out. I knew that there was something missing. I knew I had something I didn't get. So I moved out there and I started studying. Just me and my laptop hooked up to the internet. I started studying, and I actually found a website that began to really speak to me about the truths of these things. And so I contacted the brother that runs it, who is probably one of the most anointed men I've ever met. And I submitted myself to him and to be mentored into the faith. And he taught me the reality of physical to spiritual parallels and metaphors and the mystery language and the Sabbaths and the feasts, and of course back then it was Yahweh and Yahshua, and I learned all these new things. And so I shut down the End Time Saint and I started the SabbathCovenant.com, and it was really just a place where I could document what I was learning. And for myself, I wanted to just get it out there, and some place where I could organize it and I could have it. Well, over a period of time, people started contacting me. These articles that I put on the internet, were picked up by search engines, and next thing you knew, I had people all over the world, contacting me and challenging me on these things, and so I began to sharpen my sword as a teacher, that way, and I did that probably for about 15 years. That was about 15 years ago. And that's how I learned to teach. As on the internet, people contacted me via email, and we'd have email wars. And I've had some battle. I've battled it out with rabbis, with Catholic priests, with doctorates in theology here and there, and normal people, So over the years, I really began to be really good at teaching what it was that I knew, and I began to really learn it really, really well. So people ask me today, how is it, did you know all this stuff? Well, it didn't happen overnight, it happened over the course of a lifetime, and I was called out at 21, and I focused my attention on that. Even though I didn't go into the ministry, I still studied very hard and diligently, knowing having this prophecy hanging over my head that this prophet spoke over me, I was very, diligent, not to forget Yahuah. Well, I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to move into the next phase of my testimony. Hallelujah. Hello, this is Rav Sha'ul, and I'm back. Let me start with the second half. This is where my life changed. Fast forward now to about 5 years ago, the Sabbath covenant had grown. I was getting about 2 million people a year from 227 countries around the world. Sabbath covenant was really, truly become a global reach. And I was mentoring. At this point, I'd grown beyond the teaching side of it, and I'd grown to where I was mentoring young teachers into the faith, like the brother had done for me. So I was doing that for others, and they were coming out of the church, and at this point now, and the word Yahuah had started to move pretty massively, and there was a lot of people coming to the realization that there was something missing in Christianity, and so I didn't have to battle all the time anymore. It was more, I went through a first stage, initial stage, where it was always wars. I was battling with Christians and ministers and pastors. It was a war. Now and then for a while there, probably for about 10 years, it was just a teaching effort. As I taught people around the world that would come to my website, I'd teach them both through what I'd written, and then they would contact me and ask me questions and stuff, and so I taught that way for about 10 years, and then about 5 years ago, it had gotten to where I was mentoring mainly, teaching others, to become teachers, and and how to teach, and how to deal with the trials and the tests that come along with that calling, because I'd been through a lot. I'm not talking about all that in this testimonial, but just believe me when I say I have been around the block a couple of times. I've just about been in every country and seen every culture, and Yahuah has really, shown me a lot of things, and from a lot of different angles and perspectives, which helps me as a teacher. So 5 years ago or so, I'd gotten really disenchanted with the whole thing, and I felt like there was more. I thought, Father, what'd you do? Come and have this prophet lay hands on me for this? Is this it? There was so much that I knew, and I was just about to explode with knowledge and information, and everything started to come together, and I didn't have an outlet for it. It just wasn't really satisfying me, just doing it the way I was doing it through my website. So I got upset, and I told Yahuah I didn't want it. I told him, I never asked for it to begin with, and that the burden had become too much for me to bear. Him showing me all this stuff, and just me knowing it, wasn't. It was a very heavy burden, and I didn't want to bear it anymore. I had no outlet for it. That it didn't seem like I was going anywhere. And so I walked away. I said, "That's it. I don't want it. I'm gonna do something else, anything else." And I was single, so I started doing single things and going out, and I got to be pretty popular here in Dallas, and I was going out every night and drinking. Started drinking. Never drank, none of that stuff. And I was probably about 30, in mid-30s, started drinking. So anyway, I would drink because it would, I couldn't get drunk though. That was the problem. I don't know why. Most people, have a couple of drinks and they get drunk. Me, I'm just sober-minded no matter what, no matter how much I drink. But I kept trying to drink, because it did make me feel a little better, and I didn't have to have these conversations in my head all the time. Ask my wife. I walk around constantly talking to myself, waving my arms around, having these conversations with myself, hammering this stuff out in my head, and at least I could relieve that a little bit. But anyway, I began to get sick, and I started to vomit every day, multiple times a day. But I didn't quit drinking. I was stubborn. I was like, no, I don't want it. I just kept running from it. And I got sicker and sicker. And then one day, about 5 years ago, I got really sick. I woke up, buckled over in pain. And Stephanie, we were engaged then. She's my wife now, but she didn't know what to do. And I told her, I said, I need to go to the emergency room because this, I'm feeling a lot of pain. I could barely even talk. And it was one of the worst ice storms in Dallas. She couldn't drive, so I had piled my future son that I adopted, her son, now my son. I put her and Dane in the car and in my truck, and I tried to make my way to the emergency room. But it was ice so bad that, I couldn't, all the overpasses were closed. All the trucks were sliding back down, and, so I had to take all the back roads. So here I am, writhing in pain, not really knowing what's wrong with me, trying to make it to the emergency room. Well, I made it to the emergency room. How? I have no idea. But when I got there, I was in so much pain that they couldn't ease the pain. They, started shooting me up with morphine, all kinds of stuff, and it didn't work. Nothing worked. It turns out I had pancreatitis, and my pancreas had ruptured and filled my body cavity with bile. Bile is poison. I don't know if you know what that is, but your pancreas releases it into your stomach, and it eats up your food. But your stomach's lined. Your internal body cavity is not. So my pancreas had ruptured and released bile into my internal body cavities, and the doctors at the emergency room put me in an ambulance to send me to Baylor Medical Center that was equipped to deal with a dying patient because I was dying. By the time I got there, they pronounced me DOA. I was dead. The bile had entered my internal body cavity and caused all my internal organs to shut down. It was eating them away at them. And so by the time I got there, they pronounced me DOA, and they put me on a bunch of machines and just to keep my body alive, and put me into a medically induced coma. I guess, to, tell my family to make funeral arrangements. So they told my family that, they had put me into a medically induced coma, that this was terminal, that maybe at best I had a 5% chance. They said, but they don't know of anybody that's ever lived through this. But they'll put me on in this medically induced coma anyway and see what happens. But they needed to make funeral arrangements. So, but, I was in this medically induced coma, and I was in it for about 2 weeks, still hadn't died, and I developed hospital-grade pneumonia, which is terminal in most cases, especially in my case, which I was already supposed to be dead. Now I have hospital-grade pneumonia, and so they got my family together, and they said, listen, he's dead. You need to make funeral arrangements. So my family contacted all my extended family, in Texas, and everybody flew down here, to pay their last respects to me, and I was in this coma. And come to find out, everybody paid their last respects. Obviously, I'm still here. Everybody paid their last respects and, and left, and I was still in this medically induced coma. Looked like a blimp. I blew up to, it was ridiculous. Anyway, I was all hooked up to all the machines, stuff down my throat, and, I was blown up from fluids they were giving me, but eventually, after about 30 days in a coma, they decided, well, he looks like he's doing better. We're going to see if we can bring him out of this coma. So they brought me out of this medically induced coma and start running tests and all that on me, and turns out I was 100% healed. All my body organs were showing no effects. My pancreas even started working again, and they didn't know what to say. They'd never seen anything like it. So 3 days after I came out of this medically induced coma for 30 days, where I'd been pronounced dead twice, they had no choice but to schedule me for release. Not to mention I was bugging on to death because I wanted to leave. But they told me, they said, well, at least, they're going to have some long-term effects from this. There's no way, you're just going to walk away from this unscathed. You're at least going to have to see a physical therapist because you've been laying in a coma for 30 days, to help you learn to walk again and talk again and all that kind of stuff. Well, the physical therapist came and spent about as long as it takes to sign her name on the piece of paper, because I was fine. Didn't have any problem walking, talking, anything. I was fine. And so the last part of this story, before I was released, I had to be visited by the financial officer of Baylor Medical Center because I had spent 30 days in the coronary intensive care unit in a coma. And my bill was over $1 million. And I didn't have insurance. I'm self-employed. I didn't need insurance. Couldn't afford it anyway. I could afford it, but I didn't think I needed it. Anyway, so she comes into my hospital room, with all this paperwork, and she showed me the bill, over $1 million. I don't know, so many zeros there. I can't tell you exactly how much it was, but it was well over $1 million somewhere. And I looked at it and I said, well, thank you. I didn't know. I couldn't pay it. Well, she looked at me and she said, Paul, she goes, the board of Baylor Medical Center has met about your case. And she said, Baylor's never seen anything like it. We've talked to doctors across the world who's never seen anything like this. Somebody recover from something like this. And she said, so the board has discussed it, and she said, we have a program that Baylor does where we assist, in hardship cases or whatever. And she said, the board has decided to cover your entire bill. $1 million. So I walked out of that hospital room with my life. Yahuah covered the bill, $1 million bill. And with one very sure word from him. And that word was, son, you know what I've put you here to do. I've sent my prophet to tell you. I've trained you. And if you're not going to serve my purpose on this earth, then you have no purpose at all. Well, my mama didn't raise no fool. So over the past 5 years, since that point, I've written 7 books, released 7 books, about to release another 3. And I've increased my exposure on Facebook and some radio shows and things like that. And that is where I'm at now. Yahuah has, made it pretty clear, that he doesn't change and neither does his methods. If he's called me out by the laying on of hands of a prophet and told me what it is that I'm here to do, be a weapon in his hands. If I just want to run from it, then if anything, I just become a modern day Jonah, which is what happened. But that's my testimony. Now I'm still self-employed. Have a wife and my son. And the only relief I get now from that burden that I've been carrying for all these years is to write books and teach and get it out from inside me, because it almost killed me not doing it. So that's what I do. And that's when I became Rav Sha'ul, the teacher. I use that pen name because some of the things that I write, if anybody's read my books or listened to anything I say, that what I say is very unique and very controversial, and Jesus Christ is not my biggest fan. And, I really have to be careful that, some crazed Christian, we think Muslims are crazy, let's attack Jesus. Let's see how well Christians take it. Well, they don't take it very well. So anyway, I use the pen name Rav Sha'ul. And that's my testimony. Hallelujah.